Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing a long-running request on this channel. I have been asked numerous times over the year and a half I've been doing this to build the Dragonborn, not the race, the Dragonborn from Skyrim, the Dovahkiin. And I stayed away from it for the longest time, mainly because how the hell do you build someone who can do anything or everything, right? Like, there's so many different routes that the Dragonborn can go down in Skyrim itself. You can be the leader of the College of Winterhold, being an archmage. You can be a member of the Companions, a werewolf, barbarian, fighter type character. You can be the leader of the Thieves Guild, being a stealthy rogue, or even an assassin as well for the Dark Brotherhood. There's so many different routes you could go down for a character like the Dragonborn or the last Dragonborn, that, like, I wasn't really sure how I wanted to go about it. It wasn't until the request recently came up again in a comment on one of my recent videos that I thought, wait a minute, there is a way I can do it. The shouts. The shouts are the most iconic part of the Dragonborn's kit. They are the ability that is mostly unique to them, and there's so many different and interesting and varied shouts that no matter what build you make in Skyrim, you're still going to have access to these abilities that can change up your playstyle. So I thought, okay, let's make a build that at its base captures the essence of what the Dragonborn themselves are capable of, but at the same time gets as many of the shouts as possible. And I have managed to grab all but 3, with options that could work maybe for the last 3, but I wasn't quite able to get on this build. However, with the build that we have today, I think you guys are going to be quite surprised about how much we're actually able to get done. So let's get right into it. So with this build, we need to kind of get all the aspects of the Dragonborn in one. We need someone who's good at martial fighting, has the potential to do lots of spellcasting, obviously for the shouts, as well as someone who is going to be impeccable at stealth and even social situations as well, because again, the Dragonborn has their barter skill and all that. I think you all know where this is going. Yes, we're making a bard, leave me alone. Come on! It's literally called shouting. It's using your voice to cast spells, plus being good at martial, plus being amazing at stealth. Like, the Dragonborn is a bard. I'm sorry, that is just the truth. So we're going to be making a bard mostly today. There's a little bit of multiclassing here to get the rest of it. Otherwise, you know, you probably are going to have an understanding of what's coming up, but I think you'll see that my justification for each of the shouts in the form of abilities that we can grab in this game, you'll see why I had to go with this instead. But anyways, let's start off with our race of choice. I actually decided to go with the Dragonborn themselves. Not only just for the play on words, but also because, in actuality, playing as a Dragonborn actually does cover one of our shouts. That being, if you play as either a fire or ice Dragonborn, you will gain access to a breath weapon. Of course, I've gone with a brass Dragonborn, just because I don't think I've ever really built one before, which gives us resistance to fire damage, which is nice, but it also gives us the fire breath, which is one of the shouts from the base game, and this will scale up from the base game, from Skyrim, that will scale up as we level up. So yeah, that is one shout immediately done as part of our racial choice. You don't have to play a Dragonborn, though, to get all of the shouts. I do have an alternative to this that's a bit less on theme, but still kind of works as a fire breath attack. So you don't have to play as a Dragonborn for this build. In fact, there's a few reasons why you might want to play as something like a human for like shield proficiency or something like that. Otherwise, we're going to be going with Dragonborn here. Yes, because it's a fun coincidence in the name, but also because it does cover one of our mechanical options. And yes, we are going to be starting as a bard. This is going to give us a bunch of skill proficiencies. This is going to give us cantrips and spells that are going to fit a lot of the stuff that we want right at level 1. It is also going to give us bardic inspiration, but we're not really going to be using that in this build. So, first up, with our cantrips. We're able to get 2 shouts right off the bat here, or at least part of one of them. First up, we're going to pick Minor Illusion for the Throw Voice shout. In Skyrim, there is a shout that you can get which allows you to throw your voice over a distance, causing nearby people to investigate it. Well, that's literally Minor Illusion, except we're trading our voice or an illusion of a cat, but it functions the exact same. It lures potential enemies away from you to wherever you want them to go based on where you end up casting the spell. So right off the bat, we get the Throw Voice shout just from a cantrip. We're also going to be picking up Thunderclap here to be our Foos, our first part of Unrelenting Force. This is just meant to be like our starter kind of word of power here. If we just need something quick to use as a cantrip, we can do so here. Although it's not 100% necessary for this build, you can take whatever you like here instead. If you'd rather play on Throw Voice a little bit more, you could pick up Vicious Mockery here instead, because the Throw Voice shout does actually insult the people, which is what gets them to check on the location. So having this as well, you're just doing direct damage with it instead of distracting, could also work. So feel free to choose either or. I would probably, if we were going for the pure mechanical side of things, pick Vicious Mockery over Thunderclap, because Thunderclap is kind of sucks, but so, you know, we could go with that. But I think just for the sake of being as on theme as we can, I'm going to take Thunderclap here. Which is going to seem pretty pointless, because right away for our level 1 spell, we're going to grab Thunderwave. Yes, this is our Unrelenting Force for the build. It does 2d8 thunder damage at base, but can be upscaled, and can push away creatures and objects. It's literally Fus Rodar as a first level spell that, again, can be upcast, so it does scale up throughout the entire game, although you might get some slightly better options later. Overall, I feel like this is a great pick for our level 1 damage dealing spell, and again, it fits perfectly for the Fus Rodar that the game is so well known for. We're also going to be grabbing Animal Friendship. This is going to be Kyne's Peace, another shout, which causes all enemy animals, I guess, in the region to stop attacking you and become calm. Well, that's literally Animal Friendship, although it's not going to affect every animal in the area, just going to be one that you select. We're also going to grab Command for the Disarm shout, because Disarm forces an enemy to drop their weapon to the ground. Command can force an enemy to drop their weapon to the ground, among other things. So overall, Command is another shout that we're going to get right off the bat. Longstrider is here to fill a slot. Technically, there are shouts that increase our movement speed, like Whirlwind Sprint or Elemental Fury, but that's more for weapon attacks. We'll talk about that later. But Longstrider will be a decent buff for now. However, we will be training it out pretty quick once we get access to level 2 spells. Your starting instrument doesn't matter because you're going to be removing it in order to use your voice to cast your spells, because again, that makes sense. And finally, for our ability score improvements. This is going to look a bit strange. Strength and Dexterity are both at 8. We don't need Strength for this build, and Dexterity we are going to be using the Gloves of Dex because of the specific way this build is set up in order to be able to get every shout I possibly could. We did have to finagle things just a little bit. So unfortunately, we do have to use the Gloves of Dexterity to make this build work at its most efficient way possible. I guess that's not how you word that normally, but we're just going to go with it. So as disappointing as that is, we do kind of have to go with it. Next up is Constitution. I do want decent concentration saving throws and a decent hit point pool, so we are going to have a 16 here. Intelligence is at 14. We are going to be bumping this up later, but this is going to be a good starting point for us, and I'll get to why in a minute. Wisdom is at 10. I would like this higher, but a piece of equipment that I'm going to recommend for the build is going to help with those nasty saving throws. And Charisma is at 17. We're going to be bumping this up with a half feat in a minute. And as such, we want this to be as high as we can, because obviously it's going to be our main spellcasting ability. Skill proficiencies, we gain access to 3. I went with the criminal background for this build to give us access to stealth and deception. 2 skills that I want. Obviously I want stealth because we want to be able to be a stealthy Dragonborn, as well as the fact that the actual background for the Dragonborn is that they got caught trying to cross the border from Cyrodiil illegally, and as such were captured, and that's why they're on the cart with the other prisoners like Ulfric at the beginning of the game. So technically the criminal background does make sense, but I mainly just wanted the skill proficiencies anyway. You could also go for the urchin background if you want stealth and sleight of hand, but I think it's all going to come out the same in the wash. So we're going to have stealth and deception from our background, and I'm going with sleight of hand, intimidation, and persuasion. Intimidation here is just a little bit of a nod to the fact that the default Dragonborn is a Nord, and they get the ability to use a special power which causes enemies to flee. So I felt like intimidation kind of did make sense here. Otherwise you can go with anything else, but I would recommend having at least persuasion, sleight of hand, and stealth as your starting abilities no matter what background you pick. Alright, let's keep going. At level 2 we're going to take a quick multi-class dip into Wizard. Where is it? Wizard. Because this is why we needed that little bit of intelligence, because we are going to be doing some intelligence-based spellcasting with this build. Now, even though our intelligence is low to start, we're mainly going to be using this for buffing spells to begin with, and we're going to be using equipment and ability score improvements to get our intelligence up, so that we can use spellcasting from both Wizard and Bard effectively. The main reason we're wanting to go Wizard is because a lot of the kind of extra shouts that I couldn't get from the Bard levels can come fairly easily from the Wizard spell list by gathering scrolls. And since a lot of the time in Skyrim you have to get both your spells and your shouts by finding them out in the world, either through the word walls or the tomes, it did feel appropriate to have a couple of 1 or 2 wizard levels in here in order to be able to get the ability to learn our magic from our environment by finding things out in the world. Not only does it help me cover a few other bases as far as being able to get more of the Dragonborn's abilities, it just made sense for the kind of gameplay that Skyrim brings when it comes to learning its magic. So I wanted to include Wizard in this build somehow, and it ended up fitting perfectly into the build with the prepared spells that we're going to be able to get from scrolls as we play the game. So overall, I'm quite happy with this one. I think taking at least 1 level of Wizard here is important for the build. We do get to choose some cantrips here, and so you can kind of pick whatever you like. It really doesn't matter. I would say grab Firebolt and Frostbite, as they are 2 of the kind of iconic starter spells from Skyrim. Firebolt just being a decent ranged attack option for us, and Frostbite having the advantage to inflict disadvantage on attack rolls against creatures that it hits with a little bit of frost damage, so overall it just felt appropriate to grab. Your final cantrip can be whatever you like. I would say maybe grab Friends, just because, again, the Dragonborn gets all sorts of abilities that allow them to barter and do well in social situations, so having Friends does make sense. As for your spells, you do have quite a few options to pick from. We're wearing medium armor, so we don't need mage armor. However, there are a few things I would want to grab. Shield is great in the early game, definitely want that. In order to get the Frost Breath shout, you can grab Frost Fingers, allowing you to spread out in a cone, dealing 2d8 cold damage. It's a bit like Burning Hands, which you can also pick up here, which could be a replacement for the Fire Breath if you don't go with Dragonborn, so that's an option for you there, but this basically is the same, but it does ice damage instead. As for the rest of your spells, you can kind of pick up whatever you like. We already kind of have everything that I would have wanted from here. So grab things like Longstrider, Enhanced Sleep, Featherfall, just all of the useful utility options. You can even grab Ice Knife if you want that kind of ranged, like, ice attack that's like, I believe it actually is called, like, what is it called? It's like Icicle? I don't know, there is like a ranged, like, Icicle attack in Skyrim that I'm for some reason forgetting the name of. Or Witch Bolt if you do want the kind of ranged Lightning Bolt attack that you do get in the early levels of Skyrim as well. Entirely up to you what you want to grab here. I always like picking up Absorb Elements because you never know when it could be useful. And we do get to prepare 3 spells, in which case I can show you these spells I learned from Spell Scrolls. First up is Haste. Now, Haste is kind of an obvious one to grab here, because it covers 2 shouts. One being Elemental Fury, and the other being, let me just double check the name here, because I got a full list of them. Yeah, it was Elemental Fury and Battle Fury. Battle Fury, I believe, is the one that enhances ourselves. No, Battle Fury is the one that enhances your allies. Elemental Fury is the one that enhances yourselves. Both of these shouts increase your attacking speed, because in Skyrim, basically, the amount of damage that you deal with melee weapons equates to how quickly you can attack. So these 2 shouts either give your allies or yourself the benefit of being able to move faster. Well, that's Haste, allowing us to attack, gain 2 actions, meaning more attacks in a single turn, as well as a bit of AC and the ability to move a bit quicker. So Haste, because it can be cast on ourselves and on our allies, covers 2 shouts in 1, so we definitely want to pick it up here. We're also going for Vampiric Touch for Drain Vitality, another shout that can drain not only health, but also magicka, which is their form of magic, as well as stamina. For us, we can only really gain like hit point draining in this game, in which we have Vampiric Touch for that. If I could just inspect the spell. Okay, we're deciding not to work today. There we go. You can touch an enemy to siphon their life force and regain half as many hit points, and for 10 turns you can continue to use it without expending additional spell slots. So for this, we just get a bit of necrotic damage as well as the ability to drain our enemy's HP. It is another shout thing. You don't really need it for this build. It didn't come up much in my testing, but again, it is just covering another basis. We also have the Blink spell for the Become Ethereal shout. Become Ethereal means that you basically become like a ghost, meaning that you can't attack and enemies can't attack you. That's basically what Blink does in a sort of roundabout way. However, you can still attack in between blinks. So this is a slightly more powerful version of that, but it still gets the same point across. And finally, we have Gust of Wind. Gust of Wind summons a strong wind that clears back all clouds and pushes creatures back 5 meters, forcing them off balance. Yes, I did get the most important shout from Skyrim: clear skies. Yeah, so in Skyrim, there's a main quest shout that you need to get called Clear Skies, which allows you to get to the top of a big mountain because there's a snowstorm and you need to clear the weather. Gust of Wind is going to do the same thing. It's going to push away clouds of fog, clouds of darkness, stinking clouds. It can actually get rid of a lot of debilitating area of effect spells, as well as being able to push creatures back, which is somewhat similar to the Cyclone shout as well that comes from the Dragonborn expansion, which allows you to throw enemies up into the air, dealing a bit of damage when they land. So yes, you can push creatures around. So this is again another kind of 2-in-1 shout type of deal. You get Clear Skies and Cyclone. So yeah, those are the kind of spells I would have prepared from Scrolls. Now, this next part's optional. You can choose to take a second level of Wizard or not. Taking a second level of Wizard would give you an extra prepared spell slot for your Wizard spells. You get to have 5 instead of 4 by the time this build is done. So I do kind of recommend it just to give you a few more options. Otherwise, if you don't feel like getting a subclass as necessary as well, and you don't need that extra prepared spell slot, you can just kind of, you know, leave it here and pick up a level in Bard for an extra level there, or you could pick up a level in Rogue if you want the kind of Skyrim sneak attack thing, because yes, I did include Stealth Archer in this build, don't you worry. So yeah, you can go for a subclass here if you choose. In my testing, I did go over subclass because I wanted that extra prepared spell slot, so I do go to level 2 here. So it's entirely up to you what you want to grab here. The subclasses don't really matter, so it's actually a pick your favorite type situation. Abjuration can work if you want that little bit of extra damage resistance, but honestly it's not that effective with only 2 levels, so I would maybe stay away from that one. Transmutation actually makes a lot of sense because alchemy is a huge part of Skyrim systems. Being able to make alchemical brews is actually its own whole skill tree in that game, so I would actually say that transmutation would be the most on theme, but we didn't pick up medicine checks with this build. We didn't pick up proficiency, so maybe you'd want to do that at level 1 if you're going down that route. Illusion, probably not. I don't think improved minor illusion is going to be that good for us. Enchantment, maybe Hypnotic Gaze could be worth it. I think your best bet might be Evocation if you get big blaster spells for sculpt spells, Divination for the Portent ability to, you know, to be able to reroll dice rolls, as well as Transmutation for the Experimental Alchemy if you really want to go down the, you know, faithful to the Dragonborn type route. Just make sure you get that medicine check from your Bard proficiencies at level 1. So in fact, I am going to take Transmutation here because I do think it makes the most sense. You are also going to get to pick up a couple more spells here. Now, I wasn't able to get what I would consider a faithful rendition of the Dragon Rend shout in this, because again, what spell is there in the game that pulls enemies down to the ground, specifically dragons? Like, there's not really a spell in the game for that. However, Magnify Gravity could be used as a substitute, at least roleplay-wise. Increase gravity within a 3-meter radius of the chosen point. Affected creatures are crushed into the ground, reducing their movement speed by half, and it deals a bit of force damage. You could say this is Dragon Rend pulling flying enemies down to the ground, otherwise it's not really a huge deal, but I'll take it here anyway because I've made a case for it. And just take whatever you want for your last kind of spell here. It really doesn't matter, we're mainly going to be focusing on scrolls. You can grab Catapult here for the telekinesis spell from Skyrim, because, you know, that's always a fun one to use. Right, next up, we're going to be going back to Bard for Jack of all Trades and Song of Rest, as well as another low-level spell. Again, we're most likely going to be training this one out, but if you want to play true to the Dragonborn, most Dragonborns do start with one of the healing spells. So either Healing Word or Cure Wounds would work great for, I believe it's, what is it called? Is it called Restoration in Skyrim? God, it's been so long since I played. Maybe a Skyrim live stream is due on this channel. But yeah, you can pick up Healing Word for kind of the early game healing magic that you would get. Next up, at level 3, we get to choose our subclass. And what do you think I'm going to choose? It's College of Swords. I mean, don't get me wrong, College of Valor would actually be great for this build if you want to go for a sword and shield build and you want to have access to more martial weapons, but you don't need that on this build. I would say that it's not 100% necessary, but if you play as a human or maybe take a 1-level dip into fighter, College of Valor just doesn't seem that, you know, good for this build. College of Swords is the best pick overall, as it does also give us a fighting style, which I want. But you could take a 1-level dip into fighter as well if you want to go down that route, and pick College of Valor if you want to, but I do think College of Swords is just going to be that bit better for this build thanks to the Blade Flourishes. This build is going to want some more AC. It kind of caps out at around 19 as a base by the time we're said and done here, so being able to grab something like Defensive Flourish to raise our armor class up to 23 is actually really nice. And also we get just a bunch of other utility as well. We can even grab the Slashing Flourish range to make us an effective stealth archer, being able to get 2 shots in a single attack. So, you know, it's definitely worth picking up. So I think College of Swords does make sense for this build, as overused as it is. Now, we have a lot of level 2 spells here that could work for this build, but the first one I'm going to be picking up is Hold Person for the Ice Form shout. Ice Form in Skyrim basically causes an enemy to be immediately frozen as soon as the shout hits them. Now, unfortunately, we can't really freeze enemies in ice unless we do a bunch of shenanigans with some equipped items that give us the frozen condition, but only very rarely. So being able to just say, no, I'm going to shout at you and you're frozen in place with Hold Person, I think it works better overall. No, it's technically a little bit off because you're not being frozen in ice, but I do think I still want to pick it up here anyway. Next up, we also do get to pick a fighting style, and depending on what you're going for, you can pick either or. If you want to go with sword and board, because there is a lot of iconic imagery with the Dragonborn using a sword and a shield, you can. Picking up the dueling fighting style would give you a bit of extra damage on your weapon attacks as you make them, as long as you have your shield in the offhand, and that bit of extra AC would not go amiss. However, because I went with the Dragonborn race and don't get shield proficiency in any sort of form, I decided to use the other iconic imagery of the Dragonborn, in which they're stood upon the kind of rock, with like the dragon tail going around them, and they're dual-wielding a sword and a dagger, which is what we're going to be going with today. So we're picking up the 2-weapon fighting style here. We also do get 2 more skill expertise, and I'm going to absolutely put these both into sleight of hand and stealth, because again, how many times have we all played a stealth character in Skyrim? Pretty much everyone ends up going that route on their first playthrough. It's kind of funny. We're also going to be replacing a spell at this level. Since we got Longstrider from Wizard, we don't actually need it here, and it doesn't really fit the build, in my opinion anyway, so we're going to swap it out. But for what, you might be asking? Well, there are a few options here. If you want to go for Shatter for kind of an alternate take on Unrelenting Force, you absolutely could, but I personally won't be doing that. And then there's obviously all these options. If you want to get Whirlwind Sprint from Kinetic Jaunt, you could here, but I'm going to be getting that a different way in a minute. Aid would be a very useful spell for giving you a bit more of a beefy HP pool, but overall, I'm going to go for a bit of a weird choice here. See Invisibility. There is a shout in the game called Aura Whisper, which allows you to see the auras of enemies through walls and such. Now, obviously, we don't really have that functionality in BG3. However, Aura Whisper, by that logic, also lets you see invisible enemies. So, by using the Aura Whisper shout, See Invisibility does make sense, allowing us to see invisible creatures and possibly reveal them to others. So this is basically the closest thing we're going to get to Aura Whisper in the game. If you don't really care for getting this ability, then just don't take this, take something else instead, but I'm trying to be as true as I can here, so we're going to be picking up this spell here. Next up, at Bard level 4, we get to choose our first feat, and we're going to scroll right down here to the Tasha's feats, and we're going to be picking up the Fey Touched feat. I know I overused this one to death, but trust me, it really helps. So, we're going to be bumping up our Charisma to 18, and also getting the Misty Step spell, which is going to be our Whirlwind Sprint for this build. Now, I know this is technically a teleport and not a straight-up dash/increase in movement speed, but since when you actually play Skyrim and you use the Whirlwind Sprint, it feels pretty instant, I did think this worked for the build and just had a bit more utility overall. So I am going to be using Misty Step for this, but something like Kinetic Jaunt or Ashaldon Stride, if you manage to get your hands on it somehow, could also work for the build. Hell, technically even just like picking up a couple of levels of Rogue for bonus action dash if you want to sacrifice some of the spellcasting, that could also work, but hey, I think Misty Step is the best way to go about it. We also do get to pick another spell from the Divination or Enchantment School of Magic. And there's nothing really here that I 100% want, so what I'm actually going to tell you is to take Animal Friendship here, because if you take Animal Friendship, you can then replace it from your Bard spell list here and pick up something else that might be a bit more useful. In my case, I want Invisibility. Now, there's no specific shout that gives us the ability to turn invisible in the game, but there are a lot of magic options that allow you to become invisible in Skyrim, as well as being able to get like pieces of armor. One of them, I think it's Boethiah's armor, which is pretty iconic, that also lets you turn invisible. This is also going to help with our stealth archer playstyle. Yes, I'm really leaning into this for some reason, in which we get to start our combat invisible, guaranteeing advantage on our first hit, meaning that we're guaranteed to get a big hit on the start, because we're actually going to be using some critical hit threshold reduction gear to give us a bit more to work with. And again, if you decide to substitute that 1 level of wizard for a dip into rogue, that also really helps with basically guaranteeing a sneak attack on the first attack of the turn, which again is what a stealth archer would do. But anyways, with that, we are also going to take a cantrip at this level. I would pick up Vicious Mockery now. We also do get to pick another level 2 spell for this build, and again, it's entirely up to you what you want to grab here. It really doesn't matter, as we do have most things covered, and you'll most likely be training it out anyway once we get to our level 3 and 4 options, so it's kind of just a pick whatever you want for the now type deal. I did make a case for Aid earlier, so we'll go with that. At Bard level 5, we're going to be getting the typical stuff, like Font of Inspiration to bring back our Bardic Inspo on a short rest, as well as a bump up to a D8, so that's going to affect all of our Blade Flourishes, giving them a bit more damage. We're also going to gain access to level 3 spells, and there are a couple that I want to grab here. First up, I want the Fear spell for the Dismay shout, which causes enemies to run away from you in fear. So, the Fear spell works nicely. They drop everything and become fearful, having disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. So this is a pretty good spell overall. Technically the command spell could also work for Dismay because you can force an enemy to flee, but this affects multiple enemies in a wide radius, so I would say this makes more sense to kind of gain the effect of the shout. We're also going to be replacing a spell at this level, allowing us to, let's say, swap out Aid, because again we don't really need it, it's not really on theme for the build, and instead we're going to be grabbing the Slow spell for the Slow Time Shout. Now technically the Slow Time Shout makes you slow as well, but you're still a bit faster than your enemies. However, slow in this game is a lot better because we get to make only our enemies slower than us. So overall, that's 2 shouts in 1 level. Feeling pretty good about this. Next up, at level 6, we get things like Counter Charm and Extra Attack. Obviously, Extra Attack being pretty huge for this build, so I'm quite happy to grab that now. We also do get to pick another level 3 spell, and this is going to seem like kind of a funny option, but I'm actually going to go with Speak with Dead here. How many times, as the Dragonborn in Skyrim, do you speak to dead people? Like, it happens a lot, like whether it be ghosts or Draugr that somehow gain sentience, or just various other zombies, or just people in coffins, or that weird part of the Dark Brotherhood assassin questline. Yeah, no, Speak with Dead kind of makes sense, so we're going to be grabbing it here. At level 7, we're going to gain access to level 4 spells. Now, there's nothing here that immediately screams a shout to me at level 4, so this is where you're just going to be able to pick up kind of the fun, power, or utility options. I quite like picking up Greater Invisibility here to basically get an upgrade to Regular Invisibility, if we want to pick that up, so, you know, you just kind of have that option available to you. Otherwise, you can kind of just pick whatever, it really doesn't matter. At Bard level 8, we are going to gain access to another level 4 spell of our choice. Again, it's a pick your favourite type situation, doesn't really matter what you grab here. You could grab Discordant Melody if you want another big thunder damage attack to kind of build on Unrelenting Force. But there's something like Charm Monster if you want to be able to do what you do with, you know, like Animal Friendship. And you can kind of do this to like other creatures as well, so you could pick that up if you like. We also do get another ability score improvement at this point, and at this point you are going to bump up your intelligence. Now you may be thinking, why are we doing this, getting our intelligence to 16 when we could just wear the warped headband of intellect and go up to 17 intelligence? Well, functionally, 16 and 17 intelligence are the same. They're the same modifier, they're the same spell save DC, the same everything. So it doesn't really matter if we have a 16 or a 17, as long as we get to that level somehow, it's a good final number to have. And I want to free up our head slot, because again, the warped headband of intellect is our headpiece, with something else that is going to be more beneficial to the build overall. So at the moment I did want to get like 16 or 17 intelligence, but I feel like actually using an ability score improvement to get there worked out better numbers wise than using the warped headband of intellect, and you'll see why by the time we get to the end of this build when we get to the equipment section. So I know this seems strange and a bit weird and not optimal or whatever, but just trust me for now, it will make sense. At level 9 of Bard, we finally get access to level 5 spells, meaning that we're going to get 2 important ones. First one being Dominate Person for the, let me just remember the name of the shout here. Yes, the Bend Will shout. So the Bend Will shout is basically Dominate Person. It forces someone who you shout at to fight for you, completely turning their allegiance. Well, that's Dominate Person in a nutshell. But we're also going to be replacing a spell at this level. Let's ditch Healing Word for Hold Monster for the other side of Ice Form. Now we can freeze anyone in the game, not just humanoids. And finally, at level 10 of Bard, we're going to get a few important things. We're going to get Bardic Inspiration up to a D10, meaning that our Blade Flourishes are going to do even more extra damage. We're also going to get another cantrip at this level. Take whatever you like, it really doesn't matter. Mage Hand. We're also going to grab another spell at this level from our level 5 spell list here. Again, it's a pick your favourite time situation. We kind of have everything that we need from the regular Bard spell list at this point, so just grab whatever works well for you. Let's see, I mean, there's Dissonant Whispers if you want more voice shenanigans. You could go back to Aid if you want that HP buff, which is actually probably what I'm going to recommend. But there's so many different things you could do, so pick your favourite. What we really want from here, though, is magical secrets, because we're going to be able to get a couple of awesome things from magical secrets. The first thing that we're going to be grabbing is Summon Draconic Spirit. This is, again, going to cover 2 shouts in one. Call Odahviing and summon Durnehviir. Well, it's actually called Call Dragon, but the dragon that you summon in the game is called Odahviing. So basically, there are 2 shouts in the game that allow you to summon 2 different kinds of dragons. And this Summon Draconic Spirit allows you to summon up to 5 different kinds of dragons. I'd personally use the red dragon for Odahviing and the black dragon for Durnehviir, because Durnehviir is like this undead dragon. So yeah, we get to now summon a dragon, which is again a core and iconic part of the main story of Skyrim, so I felt like I had to include it in this build somehow. Next up, we're going to be grabbing Call Lightning for the iconic Storm Call shout from the base game of Skyrim. Again, one of those really awesome shouts that literally changes the weather around you to summon a lightning storm where that lightning can strike enemies. So I really wanted to get it in this build somehow, so grabbing Call Lightning to literally bring lightning down to strike your enemies did make the most sense, although something like Lightning Bolt could technically still work. Call Lightning does literally cool it down from above, so I felt like that made the most sense. We're also going to get to choose some abilities here. We can grab Persuasion and I would say Deception for like our skill expertise here. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is, well, it's everything, really. You're getting as many shouts as possible. We are missing 3, that being Dragon Rend, which I kind of made a case for with Magnifying Gravity, and Dragon Aspect, which is kind of an overall transformation that like kind of just buffs everything that you do in Skyrim, gives you a bit of health, damage resistance, and more damage overall. There's not really a way to get that in like a single thing, I guess. I mean, I guess you could say Haste could be that, or you could say maybe the Slayer form, technically, if you want to call it a transformation. I don't know, that one's a bit tricky. Let me know if you can think of a way to get that. There's like Tensor's transformation from Mr. Spells as well, but nah. And then also the final one would be Call of Valor, which again, you could use maybe something like Spirit Guardians for that if you get that somehow, maybe through the magical secrets if you don't want Call Lightning. I don't know, there's a few different ways that maybe you could get those last 3, so feel free to play around with that, but otherwise we did get most of the shouts in Skyrim, as well as kind of getting everything that Dragonborn does. We're amazing at spellcasting, being able to learn prepared spells from Wizard as well, from scrolls, so you can technically grab pretty much most of the spells in the game, if you want to, and again, you do that in Skyrim as well. You go and pick up tomes and word walls to learn your shouts and your spells, so being able to go around the world in BG3 and learn your spells that way is also a thing you can do. So not only are we a master of magic, we're also a master of martial combat with the blade flourishes and arcane acuity, using that to bump up everything else that we do, as well as we are, at the end of the day, very stealthy. We can do pickpocketing, we can do lockpicking, we can sneak around, and we can even get stealth-based attacks. If you want to take that 1 level dip of rogue to get sneak attacks as well, you'll be able to get them pretty consistently with stealth archer shenanigans using invisibility. So you can do everything that the Dragonborn would do in Skyrim with this build. So I am quite happy that we were able to pick that up. Before we get into the equipment though, I will quickly point out another shout that I was able to get. This is Perilous Stakes, which which is a shout in Skyrim in the form of Marked for Death. So Marked for Death makes it so an enemy that you hit with the shout is vulnerable to the damage that you do. You deal more damage to them. So Perilous Stakes, making an enemy vulnerable to all damage, does make sense for this build. Do note though, if you're playing on honor mode, that this won't work on enemies, only allies. Alright, moving on to the equipment. First up, our weapons. We have the Knife of the Undermountain King as my main weapon of choice. I wanted a finesse-based weapon so that we could use our dexterity for our attacks, and this is one of the best ones to do it. It allows you to reduce the number you need to roll a critical hit while attacking by 1. This will stack with other abilities of similar ilk that we'll have on this build. And whenever you roll a 2 or less on a damage die, you re-roll the die, taking the highest result. This works for any attacks that we do, not just attacks with this weapon. It also does come with the Shadow Blade feature, but unfortunately it's bugged and doesn't work at present. But the main ability, that being Organ Rearranger, is just too good to pass up. It's perfectly on this build, so I wanted to grab it here. In our offhand, we do have the Cold Snap Dagger. Again, I wanted to go for that kind of iconic imagery of the Dragonborn wielding the sword and the dagger standing atop that rock. There's like that that's like from one of the promo arts of the game, but there's also room for sword and shield if you play a human or maybe pick Valabard or take a dip into fighter. But anyways, Cold Snap as a dagger is great for us. It gives us a +1 to our armor class while in the offhand, and if an attack misses us, the creature must make a DC 13 con save or become chilled. Chilled makes them vulnerable to cold damage, which this dagger does, as well as the Frost Fingers spell, so there's reasons for that to exist on this build. So yeah, overall, pretty solid set of weapons here. Next up, for my bow of choice, we have the Dead Shot. The number you need to roll the critical hit while attacking is reduced by 1, so the same as Organ Rearranger from the Knife of the Undermountain King, so that stacks here to make it so now we roll a crit on an 18 or higher. We also double our proficiency bonus when rolling ranged attacks with this weapon unless we have disadvantage, which we very much often don't. Now you may notice that we don't actually have longbow proficiency with this build. All that means is that we can't use these extra kind of bonus attacks, that being Hamstring Shot and Brace. Otherwise, we still just get to use this as a regular bow, which is all that we really want it for, so it doesn't matter that we don't have proficiency here. However, if that does bother you, take a dip in the fighter or play a race that does come with longbow proficiency like Elf, and you'll be absolutely fine. Right, next up, for the early game bow option, we have the Jolt Shooter, which, whenever you land a hit with it, gives you lightning charges, which basically makes all of your attacks have a +1 to attack rolls and damage, so it's kind of like all of your weapons gain an extra +1, which is really nice. And if you gain 5 charges, the next attack you deal deals an additional 1d8 lightning damage. Pretty cool. Overall, solid early game option and a solid late game option. Right, moving on. We have the Helmet of Arcane Acuity for our head slot. This is why I tried to avoid using the Warped Headband of Intellect. With Arcane Acuity, we're going to be able to increase both our Wizard and Bard spellcasting's effectiveness by massive amounts for attacking with our weapons. So overall, it's going to make both of our intelligence and charisma based spellcasting a lot better. So we're definitely going to want to have that here. Next up, for our cloak, which this is entirely optional, you don't actually need a cloak for this build. However, the Shade Slayer cloak does kind of play into the stealth archer thing, so I wanted to grab it here. While hiding, the number you need to roll a critical hit while attacking is reduced by 1. This effect can stack, so as long as we're hiding, we now get a crit on a 17 or higher. So starting off with Invisibility and going for that stealth archer opener is much more likely to be, effective. Again, especially if you have that 1 level dip of rogue, if you decide to go down that route, because you will have advantage on the attack roll, meaning that you have 2 chances to roll a 17 or more, meaning you're very likely to get a critical hit. So overall, this is a very fun weapon to have. Next up, for our weapon cloak. This is next up we have the Sharpened Snare Cuirass. This is just here because it is the piece of medium armor that is closest to the promo art Dragonborn's kind of look, that kind of leather armor with accents of metal on it. Combine that with like some metal boots and such as well, and you have something that's kind of close to the Dragonborn from the promo art. It's also really nice because it adds our full dexterity modifier to our armor class, giving us a bit more armor class than medium armor normally would be able to. So overall, it's my pick for the cosplay, mainly more than anything else. Next up is the Gloves of Dexterity, which set our dexterity score to 18. You love them, you hate them, whatever. We need them for this build because, again, with quirky, trying to do a lot of different things at once type builds, we do kind of need something to bump up at least one of our ability scores, and I guess you could use the Amulet of Greater Health here, but I think from the math that I did, the Gloves of Dexterity do work out better for us in the long run. Save that amulet for someone else who might need it a bit more. And finally, our boots are the Boots of Striding, giving us momentum whenever we cast a spell that uses concentration, meaning that we can get into melee range a bit easier with the increased movement speed, as well as while we are concentrating, we cannot be knocked prone or moved against our will. Not being knocked prone is great, because being knocked prone automatically ends concentration, regardless of whether you pass the saving throw or not. And also it prevents us from slipping on grease or ice, so it's perfect for this build. Moving on to the accessories, it's kind of a free slot here, but I've gone with the Amulet of the Harpers to give us advantage on wisdom saving throws, which is going to patch up our lower wisdom, as well as a usage of shield once per long rest, which, I mean, it's always better to have at least one usage of shield than none at all, so we might as well have that here. I've also gone for the Crypt Lord Ring. Now, this one is a bit of a stretch, but hear me out. The Soul Tear Shout in Skyrim allows you to trap the soul of an enemy in a soul gem. And if the enemy dies from using the shout, because it also does a bit of damage, they rise as a zombie and fight for you for a short amount of time. This was the best way to get kind of an Animate Dead spell on this build without having to look for a scroll, and it also is a more powerful version of Animate Dead, so this is kind of my stand-in for Soul Tear. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but I'm working with what I've got here. And finally, the Keepsake Ring for Dominate Beast for Animal Allegiance. Finally, for this build, we are using a vanilla dye today, the brown alabaster dye, to give our armor the color that you see here, the kind of brown and white. So yeah, that is the build, and overall, as I said, it kind of does everything. You've got access to almost all spells in the game through both the Bard and Wizard spell lists and magical secrets. You've got a ton of battlefield control, very powerful martial attacks, you're amazing at stealth, you're amazing at conversation, you just do everything. But it is the classic saying of master of all, jack of all trades but master of none type deal, right? Because while you can do all of these things pretty well, you're not better at it than people who spec into it fully. We're not as good of a wizard as a full wizard. We're not as good of a bard as a full bard. You know, we've got these little things here and there that kind of make us slightly suboptimal in all of these areas. Like, for an example, we're not as good as stealth as a rogue. We're not as good at, you know, tanking hits as a fighter or a barbarian, but we do it all really well. And it covers pretty much all of the Dragonborn's abilities in a single build, which I honestly didn't think I was going to be able to do. Yes, there are a grand total of 3 shouts that we weren't able to get, like, 100% faithfully, but there's still kind of options for if you're able to find them. So you know what? I'm pretty satisfied with what I was able to do here. And yes, I'm sorry that this is College of Souls Bard build number 411, but it's just the closest way to get exactly what we're looking for out of a Dragonborn build. Yes, I'm sorry that it's boring, but it is what it is. But if you guys want to argue something else, let me know in the comments below. Personally, I can see an argument being made for Bladesinger when it gets added to the game, but that's neither here nor there, since it's not out yet. And yeah, there's not really much else for me to say here, other than the fact that this is my second time trying to record this video, because I didn't realise my SSD had run out of, like, space halfway through recording, and I lost most of the footage. So yeah, if you're wondering why I almost kind of rushed this last little bit, that might be why. Yeah, there's not really much else to say here. For those of you who stick around to the very ends of these videos, though, here's a little something for you. I'm thinking I want to do another remastered build soon. I really like taking some of my older concepts and, you know, prettying them up and making them a bit better with the modern knowledge and obviously the extra mod capabilities that we have now. So I want you guys to kind of tell me in the comments what build you'd like to see remastered, and if there's a build that gets there's a comment that gets enough upvotes, I will consider that for a remastered video and probably likely do it, because I'm pretty sure you guys will come up with some clever ideas, because I've got a few. I thought I might try and redo the Ghost Flameblade build. You know, remember the one that used Spores, Druid, and Flameblade along with Paladin to do big fire and necrotic attacks? I kind of wanted to take a second look at that one, but I'm not 100% sure how I would do that yet. So, if you've got a build that you'd like to see remastered, let me know. Alright, but that is going to do it for me for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.